Gadsden, Alabama, 1934. The 4th of July celebration is in full swing at the county fairgrounds. White families spread picnic blankets under oak trees while children chase fireflies and adults swap stories about crops and weather. But as the sun sets and the real entertainment begins, the mood shifts. A makeshift boxing ring appears in the center of the grounds, crude wooden posts supporting sagging ropes. The crowd gathers, anticipating the evening's main attraction, a spectacle that would reveal the darkest corners of American racism. This is the true story of Samuel "Sam" Washington, a sharecropper's son whose quiet strength and unexpected boxing skills would transform what was meant to be his public humiliation into a moment that challenged everything the Jim Crow South believed about race, power, and human dignity. You're about to hear isn't just another boxing story. It's a window into one of America's most shameful traditions, the battle royal racist spectacles where young, black men and boys were forced to fight each other blindfolded for the amusement of white crowds. These events were documented at carnivals, county fairs, military shows, and holiday celebrations across the United States from the 1890s through the 1950s. Newspaper accounts from the era describe how blindfolded African American men and boys beat each other senseless for the comedic pleasure of the audience and in the hopes of winning a few dollars. But this particular July evening in 1934 would prove that even in the darkest moments of oppression, the human spirit can find ways to resist, to maintain dignity, and to plant seeds of change that would grow for generations to come. Samuel Washington was born in 1918 in a two-room sharecropper's cabin outside Gadsden, Alabama, where the red clay soil seemed to hold both the promise of cotton and the weight of generations of struggle. His father, Moses Washington, worked someone else's land for a fraction of its profits, while his mother, Ruth, took in washing to help feed their 5 children. Sam was the youngest, a quiet boy with thoughtful eyes who preferred listening to talking and watching to speaking. The Alabama of Sam's childhood was a place where the color of your skin determined everything, where you could work, where you could eat, where you could go to school, even where you could die. The Jim Crow laws that governed the South weren't just legal restrictions. They were a comprehensive system designed to maintain white supremacy through every aspect of daily life. Black children like Sam attended schools with hand-me-down textbooks and leaking roofs, if they attended school at all. Most were needed in the fields by age 12. But Sam was different. Despite having to walk 8 miles each way to the nearest colored school, he rarely missed a day. His teacher, Miss Eleanor Carey, a college-educated woman from Atlanta who had come south to teach, recognized something special in the quiet boy who sat in the back row, absorbing every word like a sponge. She began lending him books carefully, secretly, because a black child caught reading above his station could face severe consequences. The world beyond Gadsden was changing in ways that barely touched their small community. In distant cities, a first black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson, had already risen and fallen, his career destroyed by a racist justice system that couldn't tolerate a black man defeating white opponents. The very idea of black athletic superiority challenged fundamental assumptions about racial hierarchy that underpinned Southern society. It was in this environment that Sam discovered boxing, not through formal training, but through necessity. At 14, he was tall for his age but slight, making him a target for both white boys who saw him as easy prey and some black boys who thought he acted too good for them because of his love of reading. His older brother Eli taught him the basics: how to keep his guard up, how to move his feet, how to take a punch without going down. What neither Eli nor Sam knew was that boxing was becoming more than just self-defense for the boy. Behind the family's cabin, Sam would practice for hours, shadow boxing against imaginary opponents, developing a style that emphasized speed and precision over raw power. He studied the way light fell through the trees, learning to anticipate movement from shadows and sounds. This wasn't just physical training, it was mental preparation for a world that would constantly try to knock him down. The economic reality of sharecropping meant that the Washington family lived in perpetual debt to the white landowner. Mr. Carlton Hayes ***. No matter how hard Moses worked, or how many pounds of cotton the family picked, the books never seemed to balance in their favor. By 1934, with the Great Depression deepening rural poverty, the family was facing the possibility of losing even their tiny cabin. It was against this backdrop of economic desperation and racial oppression that the yearly 4th of July celebration took on special significance. For white families, it was a day of patriotic pride and community gathering. For black families, it was more complicated, a reminder of freedoms they had never fully been allowed to enjoy, celebrated in a separate and unequal fashion. The battle. Royals that had become regular features at such celebrations across the South served a specific psychological function in maintaining racial hierarchy. As documented in newspaper accounts from the era, these events typically featured anywhere from 4 to 30 blindfolded Negroes who were forced to fight until only one remained standing. The winners might receive a few dollars, but the real purpose was to reinforce stereotypes of black men as violent, animalistic, and incapable of civilized behavior. What made these spectacles particularly insidious was how they weaponized black bodies against each other, rather than allowing African Americans to unite against their oppressors. Battle royals forced them to literally fight each other for the entertainment of the very people who oppressed them. The psychological damage was intentional and profound, designed to internalize feelings of worthlessness and reinforce the idea that black people were their own worst enemies. Sam Washington was 16 years old in the summer of 1934, caught between childhood and manhood, between the safety of invisibility and the dangers of standing out. He had no way of knowing that he was about to become part of this cruel tradition, or that his response would challenge everything about how these degrading spectacles were supposed to work. The morning of July 4th, 1934, dawned hot and humid, with the kind of oppressive heat that made shirts stick to backs before the sun fully rose. Sam had been working in the cotton fields since dawn, his thin frame bent over the endless rows when Mr. Hayes approached with an unexpected announcement. "Boy," Hayes called out, not bothering with Sam's name, "you're done for today." "Need you to come with me to town?" Sam's stomach dropped. In his experience, nothing good came from white men singling out black boys for special attention. His mother Ruth appeared from between the cotton rows, her face creased with worry. "What you need him for, Mr. Hayes?" Hayes tipped his hat in mock politeness. "Just some help setting up for the celebration, Ruth. Boy'll be back tonight." The dismissive way he said boy, as if Sam weren't standing right there, made Sam's jaw clench, but he knew better than to show it. The ride into Gadsden was silent except for the rumble of Hayes's truck and the sound of gravel beneath the tires. Sam sat in the back, watching familiar landmarks pass by: the colored church where his family worshipped, the general store where they were allowed to shop only on certain days, the courthouse where justice was as segregated as everything else. The fairgrounds were already bustling with activity. White families had claimed the shaded areas near the main stage, while black families were relegated to a smaller section on the other side, separated by an invisible but clearly understood line. Sam helped unload chairs and tables, set up booths, and string lights between the trees. All day he worked quietly, efficiently, trying to remain invisible. As evening approached, Sam noticed a change in the atmosphere. Men began gathering around a newly constructed boxing ring in the center of the grounds, a crude affair of wooden posts and sagging ropes that looked more like a cattle pen than a proper athletic venue. Among the crowd, Sam recognized several. Local white men known for their particular cruelty. Tommy Briggs, a deputy sheriff who took pleasure in roughing up black men during arrests. Cal Morrison, who owned the general store and was known to shortchange black customers. And Frank Delacroix, a former boxer who now ran a garage and spent his evenings drinking and telling stories about the fights he'd won against uppity Negroes. It was Delacroix who spotted Sam first. At 42, he was still a large man, thick through the chest and shoulders, with scarred knuckles and the swagger of someone who had never learned that intimidation wasn't the same as respect. His eyes, fixed on Sam with the predatory focus of a hunter who had found perfect prey. "Well, well," Delacroix called out, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Look what we got here." "Hayes, this your boy?" Mr. Hayes nodded. "That's Sam. Good worker. Quiet." "Quiet? Huh." Delacroix approached, circling Sam like he was examining livestock. "How old are you, boy?" 16, sir," Sam replied, keeping his eyes down as he'd been taught. 16. Delacroix seemed to savor the word. Big for 16. "Tell me, boy, you ever been in a fight?" Sam's heart began racing, but he kept his voice steady. "No, sir, not really." The lie came naturally. He couldn't very well explain the dozens of scraps he'd been in, the way he'd learned to use his reach and speed to avoid the worst damage, the hours of practice behind his family's cabin. To admit to fighting ability would be to paint a target. On his back, Delacroix grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Not really, huh? Well, tonight's your lucky night. We're having ourselves a little exhibition, and we need participants." He gestured toward the ring where several other black boys and young men had been gathered, some as young as 14, others in their early 20s. Sam recognized a few faces. Jimmy Crawford from the next farm over, Marcus Thompson, who worked at the sawmill. David Hayes, no relation to his employer, who'd recently graduated from the colored high school. "What kind of exhibition?" Sam asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. Delacroix's grin widened. "Boxing exhibition. You boys are going to give these good folks some entertainment. Last man standing wins $5 whole. $5 was more money than Sam's family saw in a month. The crowd was growing larger, white faces pressing closer to the ring, anticipation building like pressure in a steam engine. Sam could hear snatches of conversation. "Should be a good show, ... Always fun to watch them go at each other, ... My money's on the big one." They were talking about human beings, as if they were fighting cocks, ... as the boys were herded toward the ring. Jimmy Crawford grabbed Sam's arm. "Man, I heard about these things," he whispered urgently. "They blindfold you, tie one hand behind your back. It ain't really boxing. It's just ... It's just meant to make us look like animals." Sam felt a cold understanding settle over him. This wasn't about boxing or sport or even entertainment. Not really. This was about power. About reinforcing the natural order as these men saw it. About forcing black boys to degrade themselves and each other for the amusement of people who viewed them as fundamentally less than human. Delacroix was holding up strips of cloth blindfolds. "All right, boys, here's how this works. We're going to put these on you. Tie one hand behind your back. Give you each a boxing glove for your free hand. Then you get in that ring and fight until there's only one of you left standing. Simple as that." "But we can't see," protested Marcus Thompson. "How are we supposed to—" "That's the point, boy," Delacroix snapped. "Makes it more interesting. More ... He searched for the word, savoring his own cleverness. ... Unpredictable. The crowd laughed. At this, the sound harsh and cruel in the humid evening air. Sam felt something hot and bitter rise in his throat. Not just fear, but anger. Clean, pure anger at the unfairness of it all, at the way these men could take pleasure in forcing children to hurt each other, at the system that made such cruelty not just possible, but socially acceptable. As Delacroix approached with the blindfold, Sam made a decision that would change everything. He stepped back, straightened his shoulders, and looked the older man directly in the eye, a breach of racial etiquette so profound that the crowd fell silent. "Sir," Sam said, his voice carrying clearly across the fairgrounds, "I respectfully decline to participate in your exhibition." A silence that followed was electric with tension. In the Jim Crow South, a black boy simply did not refuse a white man's direct order. It was unthinkable. It was dangerous. It was revolutionary. Delacroix's face went from surprise to rage in seconds. "What did you say, boy?" "I said I respectfully decline, sir. I won't fight blindfolded for your entertainment." A crowd began murmuring, a sound like angry bees. Someone shouted, "Uppity nigger needs to be taught a lesson." Another voice called out, "String him up." But Delacroix held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Sam's face. "Is that so?" he said softly. "Well then, I guess we'll just have to change the rules." What happened next would be seared into Sam Washington's memory for the rest of his life. Instead of backing down or having Sam physically forced into the ring, Frank Delacroix did something far more calculated and cruel. He smiled. "Tell you." "What, boy?" Delacroix announced loudly enough for the entire crowd to hear. "Since you think you're too good for our little exhibition, how about we make this more educational? You want to fight fair? Let's fight fair." The crowd erupted in excited chatter. This was even better than a battle royal. This was a direct confrontation between white and black, a chance to reinforce racial hierarchy in the most visceral way possible. Delacroix began, removing his shirt, revealing a chest and arms still thick with muscle despite his age. Scars crisscrossed his torso, some from fights, others from his work in the garage. "How about it, folks? Think this uppity boy needs to learn some manners?" The crowd roared its approval. Someone started taking bets. Sam felt his mouth go dry. But he also felt something else, a strange clarity, as if the world had suddenly come into sharp focus. He thought of his grandfather's stories about slavery, about men who had found ways to resist even when resistance seemed impossible. He thought of his mother's quiet dignity in the face of daily humiliations. He thought of Miss Carey's words about education being the one thing no one could take away from you. "I accept," Sam said quietly, and then louder, "I accept your challenge." "Sir," Mr. Hayes grabbed Sam's arm roughly. "Boy, you've lost your mind. Apologize right now, and maybe." But Sam gently pulled his arm free. For the first time in his life, he felt completely certain about something. "No, sir, Mr. Hayes. I won't apologize for refusing to be humiliated, and I won't back down from a fair fight." The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Someone produced boxing gloves, proper ones, not the makeshift equipment used for battle royals. The crowd pressed closer to the ring, more animated than they'd been all day. This was better than fireworks, better than any planned entertainment. This was real drama with real stakes. As Sam climbed through the ropes, his legs felt weak, but his mind was clear. He had watched Delacroix move during the setup. The older man was strong but favored his right side, probably due to an old injury. He was used to intimidating opponents before fights even began, relying on reputation and size rather than technique. The improvised referee, a local hardware store owner named Bill Parker, called both fighters to the center of the ring. "I want a clean fight," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't much care what kind of fight it was. "Touch gloves and come out fighting." Delacroix leaned close as they touched gloves. "I'm going to hurt you bad, boy. Make you wish you'd kept your mouth shut." Sam looked him in the eye. "We'll see, sir." The bell rang, actually, someone banging on a metal trash can lid, and Delacroix immediately charged forward, throwing wild haymakers intended to end the fight quickly. But Sam wasn't there. The hours of practice behind his family's cabin, the necessity of avoiding bigger, stronger opponents, had taught him to move. He slipped the first punch, ducked under the second, and landed a quick jab to Delacroix's ribs before stepping away. The crowd fell silent, shocked. That wasn't supposed to happen. Delacroix's face reddened with embarrassment and rage. He charged again, this time more controlled, but still aggressive. Sam gave ground, letting the older man come to him, watching for patterns, for openings. Delacroix threw a heavy right hand that Sam barely avoided. He felt the wind from the punch as it passed his face. For the first minute, Sam focused purely on survival, using his speed and youth to avoid the worst of Delacroix's assault. But as the round progressed, he began to notice something. The older man was already breathing hard. Years of drinking and the soft life of intimidating unarmed black men hadn't prepared him for an actual fight. Sam began to work. A jab to the face, snapping Delacroix's head back. A quick hook to the body that made the older man grunt. Nothing. Devastating, but constant pressure, constant movement, constant proof that this wasn't going according to plan. The crowd's mood began to shift. What had started as excited anticipation of a brutal lesson turned into uneasy murmuring. This black boy wasn't just surviving, he was actually boxing. Really boxing. And he was good at it. By the end of the second round, rounds were loosely timed by someone's pocket watch. Delacroix was bleeding from his nose and breathing heavily. Sam had a cut over his left eye, but was still moving smoothly, still landing. Clean punches. The unthinkable was happening. The black boy was winning. "Come on, Frank," someone shouted from the crowd. "Knock his block off." But Delacroix was discovering what professional boxers already knew: talent and preparation could overcome size and aggression. Every time he rushed forward, Sam made him pay with sharp punches to the head and body. Every time he tried to grab and maul, Sam slipped away and countered. In the third round, Sam began to take control of the fight completely. A stiff left hand wobbled Delacroix's legs. A uppercut snapped his head back and opened a cut over his right eye. The crowd was getting uglier, their cheers turning to angry shouts. "This ain't right. Somebody stop this. Nigger's cheating somehow." But Sam wasn't cheating. He was simply better trained, better conditioned, and fighting with the righteous anger of someone who had been pushed too far. When Delacroix dropped his hands in exhaustion, Sam stepped forward and landed a perfect right cross that sent the older man stumbling backward into the ropes. The crowd was on its feet now, but not in celebration. This was all wrong. This wasn't how these things were supposed to go. A black boy wasn't supposed to be able to do this to a white man, especially not in front of an audience. The very foundations of their worldview were cracking. And then, as Delacroix struggled to regain his balance, Sam did something that no one expected. He stopped fighting. He lowered his hands and stepped back, waiting for his opponent to recover. "Come on," Sam said quietly, but his voice carried in the sudden hush. "Get up. Fight me fair." A moment when Sam Washington stepped back and offered Frank Delacroix a chance to recover became the turning point that transformed a simple boxing match into something much larger. Crystallization of everything that was wrong with the Jim Crow South and everything that was beautiful about human dignity. Delacroix, blood streaming from his nose and the cut above his eye, stared at Sam with a mixture of hatred and something else: confusion. In his world, black people were supposed to be either subservient or savage. They weren't supposed to be magnanimous. They weren't supposed to show mercy. They certainly weren't supposed to demonstrate superior moral character, while simultaneously demonstrating superior fighting ability. "What's wrong with you, boy?" Delacroix gasped, wiping blood from his face. "This is a fight." "Yes, sir," Sam replied calmly. "It is a fair fight. That's what you said you wanted." The crowd was growing increasingly agitated. What had started as entertainment was becoming something dangerous and unpredictable. Several men were calling for the fight to be stopped. Others were demanding that Sam be disqualified for ... For what? For being too good? For showing sportsmanship? For refusing to conform to their expectations of how a black person should behave? Deputy Sheriff Tommy Briggs climbed onto the ring apron. "That's enough," he announced. "This fight is over." But before he could step through the ropes, an unexpected voice rang out from the crowd. "Let them finish." Everyone turned to see *** Judge Henry Coleman ***, the most powerful white man in the county, pushing through the crowd. A tall, silver-haired man in his 70s, Judge Coleman commanded instant respect. Even the deputy sheriff stepped back. Judge Coleman had been watching from the edge of the crowd, saying nothing, but his sharp legal mind had been processing everything he witnessed. He had seen the battle royal setup, heard Delacroix's challenge, watched Sam's refusal to be degraded, and his subsequent agreement to a fair fight. More importantly, he had watched Sam's conduct in the ring, not just his boxing ability, but his character. "You challenged the boy to a fair fight, Frank," the judge said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Seems to me he's giving you exactly what you asked for. Question is, are you man enough to finish what you started?" The crowd fell silent. Judge Coleman had just made it impossible for Delacroix to quit without losing face completely. But more than that, he had publicly acknowledged that Sam Washington was conducting himself with honor in a situation where he had every right to be angry, every reason to be bitter, every excuse to be unsportsmanlike. Delacroix looked around the crowd, seeing no sympathy, no way out that didn't involve admitting he had been outclassed by a 16-year-old black boy. Pride, the same poisonous pride that had created this situation, forced him back to the center of the ring. The fourth round began with Delacroix throwing everything he had left. Desperate now, he abandoned any pretense of boxing technique and simply tried to hurt Sam any way he could. He threw punches after the improvised bell, attempted to use his elbows, and even tried to grab Sam in a wrestling hold. But Sam remained composed. Every dirty tactic was met with clean boxing. Every attempt at intimidation was answered with skill and sportsmanship. When Delacroix threw a punch after time was called, Sam simply stepped back and waited for the action to resume. When the older man tried to grab him, Sam clinched briefly and then pushed away cleanly. It was during this round that something remarkable happened. The crowd began to quiet, not out of boredom, but out of recognition. Even the most racist spectators were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary, not just superior athletic ability, but superior character. The end came suddenly. Delacroix, exhausted and frustrated, dropped his guard while throwing a wild right hand. Sam stepped to the side and threw the same straight right cross he had been practicing behind his family's cabin for 2 years. It caught Delacroix perfectly on the chin, and the older man went down hard. He didn't get up. The improvised referee began counting, but it was clear that Delacroix was finished. He struggled to his hands and knees at 8, but couldn't rise further. At 10, Bill Parker raised Sam's hand. "Winner," he announced, but his voice lacked conviction. This wasn't how any of this was supposed to work. The crowd stood in stunned silence. A few people began to clap tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Even some of the white spectators found themselves applauding, though they would struggle to explain why in the days that followed. Sam walked over to where Delacroix was sitting in the corner, still dazed. He extended his gloved hand. "Good fight, sir," he said. Frank Delacroix looked up at this black boy, who had just defeated him in front of half the county, who had shown him more respect and sportsmanship than he had ever shown anyone who had demonstrated both superior ability and superior character. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was forced to confront the possibility that everything he believed about race might be wrong. Slowly, he reached up and shook Sam's hand. The immediate aftermath of Sam Washington's victory was as complicated as the Jim Crow South itself. As word of the fight spread through Gadsden and the surrounding county, reactions ranged from grudging respect to violent threats to something approaching bewilderment. Many white residents simply didn't know how to process what they had witnessed. Judge Coleman, who had intervened at the crucial moment, made a point of publicly shaking Sam's hand after the fight. "Son," he said in a voice that carried to the dispersing crowd, "you conducted yourself with honor tonight. That's something that transcends the color of a man's skin." The judge's words carried weight in the community, and they likely saved Sam from serious retaliation in the immediate aftermath. But they also created ripple effects that would last for years. Within a week, 3 different boxing promoters had approached Sam about turning professional. The most serious offer came from Marcus "Doc" Williams, a black promoter from Birmingham who had been building a stable of promising young fighters. Williams had heard about the fight through the network of black churches, barber shops, and social clubs that served as the community's informal communication system. "Boy's got talent," Williams told Sam's father. "More than that, he's got character. In boxing, that's rarer than talent." But Sam's path forward was complicated by the realities of segregated America. Professional boxing in the 1930s was still largely divided along racial lines. Black fighters could achieve success, but they faced enormous obstacles: limited opportunities, smaller purses, and the constant threat of violence if they became too successful too quickly. Sam spent the remainder of 1934 and much of 1935 training with Williams, learning the professional side of boxing while continuing to help his family with their sharecropping obligations. His reputation grew throughout Alabama and into Georgia and Mississippi. He was no longer just the boy who beat Frank Delacroix. He was becoming Gentleman Sam Washington, known as much for his sportsmanship as his boxing ability. The nickname came from his habit of helping defeated opponents to their feet and always shaking hands after fights, regardless of how dirty his opponents had fought. In an era when black boxers were often portrayed as savage or animalistic, Sam's consistent displays of class and dignity challenged stereotypes and earned respect even from hostile crowds. His professional career, while modest by modern standards, was remarkable for its time. Between 1935 and 1942, Sam compiled a record of 34 wins, 8 losses, and 2 draws, fighting throughout the South and occasionally in northern cities like Chicago and Detroit. He never got a shot at a major title. The color barriers in boxing's upper echelons remained largely intact, but he earned enough money to buy his family's freedom from sharecropping and eventually to purchase their own small farm. More importantly, Sam became a symbol in the black community. His story was told and retold, growing in the telling, inspiring other young people to believe that dignity and hard work could overcome seemingly impossible odds. He received hundreds of letters from young black men and women who had heard his story and found hope in it. The impact on Frank Delacroix was profound and lasting. The man who had once taken pleasure in humiliating black people found himself unable to continue such behavior after being shown mercy by someone he had tried to degrade. He never became an advocate for civil rights, but he stopped participating in the casual cruelties that marked so much of Jim Crow life. His garage became one of the few white-owned businesses in Gadsden that served black customers with basic respect. Judge Coleman meanwhile, began using Sam's story in his private conversations with other white leaders, arguing that the traditional assumptions about race were not only morally wrong, but factually incorrect. While he never became a public civil rights advocate, his behind-the-scenes influence helped moderate some of the worst excesses of local Jim Crow enforcement. Sam's impact extended beyond boxing. He used his modest fame to promote education in the black community, often speaking at schools and churches about the importance of learning. He never forgot Miss Eleanor Carey's gift of books and literacy, and he helped establish several small libraries in rural black communities. When World War II began, Sam was among the first to volunteer for military service, despite the military's segregated structure. He served with distinction in the all-black 761st Tank Battalion, earning a Bronze Star for valor during the Battle of the Bulge. After the war, Sam returned to Alabama and opened a gym where he trained young fighters both black and white, emphasizing not just boxing technique, but character development. His motto, painted on the gym wall, read, "Champions are made in the heart, not just the ring." Samuel Washington died in 1987, 3 weeks after his 69th birthday, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who had grown up hearing the story of that July night in 1934 when their grandfather refused to be degraded and, in refusing, found a way to assert his full humanity. His funeral was attended by over 800 people, representing every race and social class in Gadsden and beyond. The eulogy was delivered by Dr. Robert Hayes, the grandson of the same Carleton Hayes who had owned the farm where Sam's family once sharecropped. The transformation represented by that moment spoke to the power of individual actions to create ripple effects that extend far beyond their immediate circumstances. Sam's story matters not because it offers easy answers about racism or simple solutions to complex problems. It matters because it demonstrates that even in the darkest circumstances, individuals can choose dignity over degradation, character over convenience, principle over safety. His refusal to participate in his own humiliation, followed by his gracious conduct in victory, created a crack in the seemingly impenetrable wall of Jim Crow thinking. The battle royals that once entertained white crowds across the Jim Crow South were designed to reinforce the idea that black people were fundamentally different, fundamentally lesser, fundamentally unworthy of respect. Sam Washington proved that narrative wrong not through anger or violence, but through skill, dignity, and an unshakable belief in his own worth as a human being. Today, as we continue to grapple with the legacy of racism in America, Sam's story reminds us that change often begins with individual moments of courage, with ordinary people deciding that they will not accept the unacceptable, will not participate in their own oppression, and will not allow others to define their worth. The question Sam Washington faced that night in 1934 is the same question each of us faces when confronted with injustice. Will we have the courage to stand up even when the odds are against us? Will we choose dignity even when the cost is high? Samuel Washington chose dignity, and in doing so, he lit a candle that continues to burn, reminding us that the power to change the world often begins with the simple decision to refuse to be less than fully human. The fight for equality is won one person, one moment, one choice at a time. What choice will you make?